Are you able to hear like little music in the background of my?
Yeah, this is, we are going live now. Okay, so we are here. We are on the first day of free agency. Welcome to the Raptors Report Show. I am Julian. I am joined by Steve, aka Raptors Shack. I'm sure you know who he is if you follow, if you're on Twitter at all and you follow the Raptors. We are here and we are going to be talking about the Toronto Raptors and their draft, excuse me, their first day of free agency, and also do a little bit of talking about the rest of the league and kind of where they have landed, some of the bigger deals regarding that. And we're going to be doing a bit of a rundown. But welcome to the show. This is the third episode. Hopefully, the broadcast is a little better this time because last time there were some audio issues. Hopefully, we have nailed some of those. We did an audio test before, so everything should be hunky-dory. I am expecting this stream to go off without a hitch. Knock on wood. Okay, welcome to the show, Steve. How you doing? How are you
Thank
enjoying
you.
things?
I'm well. Happy Canada Day to you and everyone else.
Happy Canada Day. Okay, so the Toronto Raptors made a couple of moves the start of off season. Took them quite a while because they actually had to, sit around for the first, day and a half, which is pretty customary with the Raptors. I feel like they are maybe the second or third choice for many free agents. Maybe they're looking for other teams, and they really only signed one guy, and that is obviously Sandro Mamukelashvili, who is a player who born in the United States, went back to Georgia, where his family is from, and then came back to the United States and played at Montverde Academy in Florida. I believe he was the class ahead of Scotty Barnes, so I don't think he ever played with Scotty Barnes. But did he play with RJ Barrett? Was he
I'm not
part of that
sure
class?
actually. I'm not sure.
In any case,
2020. Yeah. Anyway, he was the
he's
2021 draft, right?
yeah.
But he's
So
a bit older. Yeah.
yeah, he is. Let's just quickly take a look at some of his statistics. I'll flip it over to his B-ball reference page so we can take a look at Sandro. So Sandro is 26 years old. He's a stretch big. He most recently played for the San Antonio Spurs, where he actually had probably his best season as a pro, both in terms of just kind of like his per minute stats. He played for both, before that, he played for Milwaukee. And this season, he had career highs in terms of shooting. Well, his first season, he shot the ball 42% from the field in about 9 minutes per game. So it's a little bit smaller sample size. He played 11 minutes per game for the San Antonio Spurs. And he is a stretch forward / big. He actually kind of reminds me of a former Toronto Raptor by the name of Juancho Hernan-Gomez. And they are both kind of finesse bigs that like to play the pick and pop. They like to shoot the ball. You can play them off the ball a little bit. How do you feel about the signing?
Well, I was surprised. I didn't think they'd had their eye on Mamu, and I hadn't really thought about him in a while, probably since his Bucks days, but I feel pretty good about it. I think they got him for a good number. I think he kind of fills a need that they fills a role that they need. Shooting off the bench is always good, and everything I've got from Spurs fans is that character-wise, he's just one of the most beloved guys that they've had, and that really fits what the Raptors have been trying to do lately, where they're just trying to lean into character first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about him defensively. Everything I've heard about him is he's got a little bit of wiggle offensively. He can shoot. He had one really big game against the Knicks, but I've not really seen or heard much about him defensively. But off the bench, a lot of the guys on our bench already are pretty defensive oriented, so I don't think that's a big deal.
No, yeah, he is. He's not a rim protector. One thing that's pretty good about him is that he is a pretty good rebounder. So per 36 minutes, let's just quickly take a look at his statistics again. He is a pretty good rebounder. As you can see, he averaged last season per 36 minutes almost 12 rebounds a game. This past season, he averaged around 10 rebounds per 36 minutes. And when you watch him play, he does the thing that bigs are supposed to do, which is take a look at the basket when a shot goes up and get in position. And he's not a rim protector by any means. In fact, when I was kind of surprised when I looked at his B-ball reference page and it showed him standing 6'11", because when I watch him play, he looks kind of more like a forward, which is why I mentioned Juancho. I think he's a better rebounder than Juancho. And really the problem with Juancho Hernan-Gomez was that he just did not shoot the ball well enough. I remember being kind of impressed with his cutting and his ability to, pick and pop and move off of the ball and do all of that kind of stuff. His defense also wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. But I was like, if he shot, 35% from three, he'd be a good bench player. And instead he shot 25% from three, which really seems to be like the curse for the Toronto Raptors, is that they go out and they get these guys with a rep for being a shooter. Svi comes to mind, obviously. Svi Mikhailuk, the baller from Ukraine or?
Yeah, from Ukraine. Yeah.
And he came in with a rep. He had actually pretty decent shooting splits in his prior tenures in other spots, OKC and whatnot. And then he came in and he just could not shoot the ball. And he would do ridiculous things like trying to take, like he would catch an open shot and he'd be open for just a catch and shoot. And then he'd kind of find a way to add like a dribble combo in before he took a shot, which is just like maddening. Yeah. But I digress.
Well, he was the guy who broke the seal of the free agency madness when Shams didn't tweet anything except all of a sudden just Svi and his re-signing with Utah.
I don't even. Oh, was that this year?
That was this year.
I didn't
the
even.
First thing Shams announced was Svi Mikhailuk.
Oh man, how many push notifications did you get for that? Like 5?
I already had him muted. So.
Oh my god, I don't know if anybody else is like this because Shams is just like bombarding everybody on Twitter who has his notifications turned on, just slamming
into 5 tweets for no reason.
Yeah, that's very annoying. What was I gonna say? Not about Svi, but about Mamu. Oh, right. You have to talk about, you can't just talk about the player, you got to talk about the contract as well. And that's kind of the crux of why this is a pretty good move in my estimation. So first of all, the Toronto Raptors signed him to a minimum deal. So 2 years, $5 million, which is 5.5 million, which is great. So you get a guy who admittedly has really only played for teams that are either, rebuilding or he is in very small minutes per game. And even this past season on a, relatively competitive San Antonio Spurs team, I know that they weren't trying to tank until Wemby went down. So, he was getting some decent minutes on an okay team in the West. But, you're taking a gamble here. He is not an established player, but that's the good thing about this, is that instead of going out and getting a guy who is already established and you have to play top dollar for him, you're going out and you're making a calculated risk. You're saying, okay, we've got some minutes, especially at the backup 5. That's really where I think that they're going to be playing this guy. And they get a guy who kind of fits into what I think the team wants. So if he is able to live up to what I would say is the potential for the deal, which is a solid contributor who's shooting mid to high 30s in terms of 3, chipping in on the boards and eating up 10, 15 minutes a game, I would say that's a huge win. That's just a big win. You get like a quasi-rotational player for a nice cheap contract. Of course, there's the second year of the deal is a player option, which is basically the only...
It wouldn't be a Raptors contract if there wasn't a player option in it.
That is literally, they just give, that is, I'm not sure if there is a player that they have signed that does not have a player option on their
No, I
deal.
know. I feel like it's like built into the tax code of coming to Canada is that it has to have a player option. Because I like maybe their agents are just like, no, we won't do more than 1 year unless there's an opt out because we don't know about coming to Canada. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, listen, I think the idea behind it is that they, as a front office, probably have a philosophy that if you are willing to give somebody a contract and you want to lower the amount of money that you have to pay the player, you literally just throw on the player option, and you probably just have to give less per year. I'm almost certain that that is sort of the formula that they're using, which is to give players player options so that they can save a bit of money in the near term. And I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure that they have maybe, when an actuary is, right? Like an accountant, basically, that
Yeah.
looks into the data and determines kind of a cost-benefit analysis based on, the metrics and the math. I'm sure that they have like a team of people that do that, and this is just what they've settled on as a good value play for the team. So I like the deal. I give it a thumbs up. Of course, this is a small thumbs up. So I give it a thumbs up, but at the same time, I think people should temper their expectations. This is, if you've ever watched the Toronto Raptors, they have tried to fill this kind of role many, many, many times in the past in a very similar way. Okay, Svi Mikhailiuk, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, oh God, way back in the day, Linus Kleza, oh God, that's way too far back. And also that contract sucked, so not a great example. But you know what I'm talking about. This kind of like minimum guy where they're taking a gamble on them and then hope it pays off. So don't get your hopes up.
Yeah,
Don't
I think exactly. The expectations have to be tempered because like even last year, I think our fan base is really hard on these role players that we signed front of the bench. Like, yeah, Bruno Fernando wasn't that good. That's why he's getting paid peanuts and he's
right.
getting killed because he's not producing at like a normal backup center level. It's like, I mean, we got to have low expectations relative to the actual contract that they are. So I think for him to live up to his contract, I think he just has to provide some meaningful bench minutes, shoot decently efficiently, and he doesn't even really have to drive winning necessarily. Just don't be such a bad gap that it's obviously driving losing.
Yeah, absolutely. He just needs to eat minutes.
Yeah,
And just about him, like going into sort of like when you watch him play, he's not obviously he's not a traditional big. He is a stretch big. And kind of like a lot of those like smaller European ballers, like he can handle the ball a little bit. He can play in transition. He can cut. He kind of knows how to play the game pretty well. But again, he's not a rim protector. He is a pretty good rebounder. It just seems like he ticks enough of the boxes that, as you said, like the Toronto Raptors have guys who can come in and play defense. The guy just needs to kind of stretch the floor out, eat some minutes, grab some rebounds, do that kind of stuff. And I think it'll be a pretty solid signing. And if it isn't, they didn't pay very much either. So they could probably just get rid of his contract if they needed to. So that is the first order of business, the Sandro Mamukelashvili. Next up, we got to talk about Jakob Poeltl, the big man from Austria, probably one of the best Toronto Raptors this past season. Definitely the most consistent Raptor. If you've watched any of the videos that I made after any of the Raptors games, I would go through after, doing a little spiel. I would rate all of the Raptors, basically, who is the best player in the starting lineup. And he didn't win most often, but there was no other player that came second more often than Jakob Poeltl. So he was consistently being the second best player every single night. And sometimes, like if you watch any competitive sports like racing or anything like that, you don't have to come in first multiple times in order to have the most points at the end of the season. You just have to come in second every single time. And as long as the first place person doesn't come in first every single time, you're going to have the most points at the end. So there is an argument to be made that he was the Toronto Raptors' best player last season. Just if you take only consistency. That is up
Yeah,
until they rested him at the end of the season. Go ahead.
which I think is like the clearest indication that he is who is driving probably the most impact and the most winning is the cheat code for tanking games was if you can sit Yak. They try to do this for 2 years where they go, okay, take it easy, take your rest, because yeah, he is the one who's driving the most impact. Like you would naturally want to think it's Scotty, but the box score and the advanced metrics usually say it's Yak. And I mean, it's not surprising if he's our only like real established center. You take that away, and then you start running guys like Fernando, Castleton, all these guys who are not real starting centers in there. You get eaten up real quick. And he's a guy, like he's a guy who comes to work. He does his job. He's a lunch pail guy. And I think you always get the same consistent effort from him.
Right, absolutely. Steve, there's just, can you turn up the volume on your mic? Because I'm getting some people saying
Okay.
that the volume's a little low.
Yeah, okay.
So while he's doing that, I will just quickly talk about kind of what Yak brings to the team, why I think it's important that they got this squared away so that they can concentrate on the season next year, and really kind of the trajectory of the team, because I think that this is a bellwether for what they expect to do. Although when I was speaking to Steve earlier, he mentioned a good point. But first of all, let's talk about what he brings to the team. And we've already discussed a little bit the consistency, the ability to, night in, night out, come in, bring the lunch pail, and do what you expect a center to do, which is rebound, protect the basket, not make very many mistakes, quarterback your defense, be a rim deterrent, set screens, score at the rim. That is a big thing. A lot of the time, people don't really appreciate that element of a center's game. A lot of the time it's on the defensive end, but Yak has a couple of moves on offense as well, which is why he was able to average a career high in terms of points last season. So he had some pretty impressive numbers last season. Let's just take a quick look at Jakob Poeltl's numbers last season, because he did have like an impressive numbers season. So a lot of people were concerned about like how much he was getting paid, and we'll get to that because it is important to sort of not justify, but take a look at what he does in terms of the contract as well. So if you take a look, he averaged 14 and a half points a game, almost 10 rebounds a game, almost 3 assists a game, on 62% from the field, 33.5% from three. And he actually improved considerably at the free throw line. So one of the things that you will take a look at, actually, it's not as... it is a lot better. So if you take a look at what he averaged for his career, he was only averaging around 55% for his career from the free throw line. And this past season, he bumped that up like amazingly. He had a huge jump, 12% to 67%. And that is out of hack territory. Like, you can't hack a player who shoots almost 70% from the line. It's just not a good strategy, which means that you can keep him in the game towards the end. So that's a huge development, major development for a center in his, how old is he now? 29 years old. That's a big jump.
Yeah,
So
29.
It could be a fluke. Not saying that this is permanent or anything, but that was a good sign. The second thing is that he was able to handle the rise in his usage at the beginning of the season. That is an important thing to talk about, is the fact that a lot of the time when you talk about big men, they have a limited repertoire of moves, and they can't generate the shots themselves a lot of the time. A lot of the time they are completely reliant on guards to break the defense down, and then they just finish it at the end. Whereas I think that Jakob Poeltl, one of the value adds that he brings as a player is his ability to score in ways that other bigs can't. And this is a big point because it was very important for teams like the Denver Nuggets, for teams like the LA Clippers, for the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you watched the playoffs this season with Hartenstein, the ability to make that floater shot is huge in the new NBA. It seems like that has come back around and is one of the more important things that you can bring to the table as a big man. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, he really added that push shot to his game, and I don't know if you remember Darko Rakovic, the coach, mentioning preseason that he wanted to start using Yak as more of a table setter in this high post role as like a hub, and people were like, hold on, wait, what do you mean? Why would you do that? And they started trying that, and it started working well because he's actually a great passer.
Yeah.
So once he started kind of running those two-man games, I didn't see him do it that much with IQ, but he got pretty good with it with Scotty, and that kind of added another layer to his game. But I think for me, the most impressive thing for Yak is his hands.
Right. Absolutely.
One of the things that matters the most to me for any big, like that I will be down on a big if he doesn't have that I mean, catch radius is great, but you need to be able to catch these little fastball passes that you're getting. Like something that makes Evan Mobley so good is that he's catching anything that Darius Garland or Mitchell
Right.
is doing on these little dump offs and stuff. And what I saw a lot this season was Yak being able to just be right on the spot in the dunker spot and just catch all these little things that RJ was dumping off to him, that Scotty was dumping off to him, and go up immediately with that nice little push. It really did add an extra layer to the offense, and an offense that was, for the most part, struggling because they kept just trying to run this really high action of Scotty at the top of the key. And then it
Right.
kind of allowed them to diversify their offense and start running it through a big in a non-traditional way because he's not a high flying big and he is not a stretch big. But he was able to kind of make it so it's not so clunky and crowded in the paint like a lot of people worried.
Right. No, absolutely. Sorry, I cut you off with my agreements, but
No worries.
the fact that he is able to come into the mid post area in the key and catch the ball, like you're absolutely right. Number one, about the fact that he has really good hands and he doesn't bobble a lot of passes. So that is, as you said, one of the big things is that big men generally they're in the game for their size, and it is incredibly hard to find a person that is that size. In the NBA, like they did some kind of study that like people who are 7 feet tall between this age cohort, like 20% of them are in the NBA or something like that. I don't even remember the percentage, but literally they're very rare to have a person that large. So you kind of have to pick and choose. Like you have to, some of them have certain strengths, some of them have other ones. His ability to catch the ball is very good for a player his size. And another thing is that you got to talk about, when you're talking about bigs, you got to talk about the size, because a lot of players are just not as large as he is. And you can see that in NBA games. When another center has the size and strength advantage, it's a bully contest.
Yeah.
They will get inside, they will box you out, and they're in position. They will get almost every rebound. They will get, tip outs. They'll get putbacks. They will be able to carve out space in the post and then be available for a pass, an easy dump off. That's the kind of stuff that A, you want to have on your team, and B, you want to stop the other team from being able to do that to you. And we saw that happen in the second half of the New York Knicks Indiana Pacers series, because there was another guy who got a very similar contract. And in fact, because he got this contract, there were a lot of comparisons between the two. So the guy I'm talking about is Miles Turner. Miles Turner got a very similar contract. I think he made like a little bit more on the final value, but like per year, I think Poeltl is getting more on the length of his contract. Anyway, Miles Turner had a big issue with Mitchell Robinson in the Eastern Conference Finals. Then he had a huge issue with Isaiah Hartenstein in the finals against the Oklahoma City Thunder, where he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not slagging the guy completely, because I think what he brings to the table, it's unique. But at the same time, you're giving up those actual things where like bigs are supposed to come in and provide, which is rebounding, stopping offensive rebounds. Miles Turner is a pretty good rim protector, so he does that. But the rebounding, he was getting clobbered by Mitchell Robinson, clobbered by Isaiah Hartenstein. And Jakob Poeltl, to his credit, one of the good things that he does is that he clears out the paint and you don't get destroyed that way. And on the other end, he picks up his fair share of offensive rebounds.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you remember probably his best game of the season where he had like 35 points and I don't know, almost 20, some crazy amount of rebounds against the Celtics. Joe Mazzulla had really high praise for him, and I think he put it really well. He said that guy's a bear down there.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, he's like a grizzly bear in the paint who is just ripping off rebounds, and like he's just going to work. He's putting his body in there, and that's very important for somebody like the Raptors who, when you run a guy like Scotty through all that physicality constantly, he's going to wear down.
Right.
But you've got a big bully like Yak, and he's basically supposed to take a lot of that abuse. Like in the finals, Miles Turner struggled against Hartenstein, but Chet Holmgren struggled mightily against Miles Turner because he's just that much smaller than him.
Right.
Like Chet didn't have a very good finals offensively because he just didn't have a body.
He couldn't score inside.
Exactly. He couldn't compare to that. So, I mean, in terms of the actual physicality of a guy like Yak, he's a guy that you need on your roster. And I made the point that, like, I think initially the number some people thought overpay. And we got to think, like, this is the Raptors. There's no free agent coming to save us. We can't go find that. It just doesn't happen. And so really the only other alternative to find another center is to trade another first-round pick to get one. And I mean, I'm sure they don't feel like doing it. I don't feel like doing that. I don't think that you're really going to, when you canvass the market, I don't think there's much out there that you could do unless you're going to package multiple and go for a really good center. So what happens is you have to overpay by maybe a couple million a year. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Right. It's also important to note that this is a backloaded contract, kind of, just the way that it's structured. So people
it's creative.
It is very creative because not only does he have this coming season in which he is on like a full contract, what was going to happen if he did not sign this extension was that he would have a player option in the final year of his deal. And he's played well enough that he would probably decline that unless he was like got injured, knock on wood, or like, had a really down season. He would have not exercised the player option, become a free agent. But the way that they did it was that they made it so that this coming season and the season where he would have a player option, both of those seasons are at the same market value as his current contract. So instead of wiping away that second year for the extension, they just added it on, and then his new contract starts after the player option on his contract. That's all a very complicated way of saying he's making $19.5 million this season, $19.5 million next season. Oh, sorry, $19.5 million next season, $19.5 million the year after that, and then his $25+ million contract kicks in after that. So the Raptors will have 2 seasons at that lower rate for Yak, which I think is a good bit of business. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and the final year is only $5 million guaranteed.
Oh,
so
really?
Again, yeah. So again, a very clever contract. I think when you look at the details of it, I think it actually becomes a great contract because, yeah, people are worried about, okay, well, then we've got him on the books when he's 34 years old, whatever. Well, it'll be $5 million guaranteed. It won't be a big deal.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, like, just look at Brook Lopez, okay?
Yep.
The guy is still in the league. He's an older player, but bigs, as I was saying earlier, when talking about 7-foot-tall players who know how to play basketball, that's not a very big number, right? Which is why they tend to stick around in the league for a very long time, because you get a guy who's 7 feet tall and you don't have to teach him how to play basketball. So he could be a contributor for the Raptors for the duration of his contract. It's not out of the question. So I like the deal, although I will say, I know that a lot of people are talking about overpay. I think it is a slight overpay when you consider the second part of the contract. But I think that the Raptors just didn't really have a choice other than him, and he and his agents knew it. they knew that they weren't going to be finding or going out and trying to find another center. Especially a guy who is, as well liked within the team, knows the system, good veteran, just a solid player. And yeah, I am totally down with that deal. Is there anything else you can think of regarding Yak and the contract that the Toronto Raptors just signed him to, or do you think we can move to the next point?
I think we can move to the next point. I think we covered what the actual contract is, and I think, well, I mean, yeah, we can move on to what those deals mean for certain other players that have been with the organization.
Good point. Okay, so reading the writing on the wall here, Christopher Boucher, the final player on the Toronto Raptors 2019 championship roster. He is the last thread holding the current iteration of the Raptors to that title run. It looks, I mean, it's not official yet, but there's almost no way that I could see them bringing him back. He has not been signed in free agency, and he is such a chaotic, strange player that it's going to be interesting where he ends up.
Yeah.
I thought Denver would be interested in him last season, but they ended up not making very many moves, probably because, they made a bunch of moves this offseason, which I think have been pretty good. But there's not really a landing place for him that I can think of. I think he will eventually be signed, but I don't think it'll be the Toronto Raptors, especially with Sandro coming in.
Exactly. I mean, you'd probably have to go into the tax to give him anything that's kind of worthwhile to him. Because, I mean, I think Sandro, they did the most they could with the little wiggle room that they have. And they probably are just planning past Boucher because they expect him to probably ask for a bit more. He'll probably end up having to settle for a lot less. I mean, you would hope they could get an MLE or something, but I feel like, he's a little bit older. I think he's 31 now. And I don't know how much teams value that. I know that during the trade deadline, teams like Atlanta were interested. There was talks they were trying to give 1 second round pick, but we were trying to get 2, and then that fizzled out. I've heard rumors that, exactly.
Classic.
I've heard rumors. And I think like we were trying to get Karis LeVert included because he was getting flipped around and moved around. I'm not sure, but and then I think the rumors were also for Golden State might have interest because they lost Kevon Looney. They're kind of going through a transition period with bigs, and they've had a history with Chris Boucher. I don't know if that'll actually happen, but it'll be interesting to see when he does end up with somewhere, and it will be weird because he's the longest tenured Raptor at this point, right? Because Yak has a break in his time with the Raptors, but I think Boucher was the longest tenured Raptor.
Yeah, he is going to be missed around these parts. And he's a very divisive figure within Raptors fandom. Some people hate him, and I get that. Some people, including myself, I would say, like him, because I think what people see is a wildly inconsistent player who is very much about, is his shot going in that night?
Mm-hmm.
Is he getting offensive rebounds? And if the answer is no, it's probably not going to be a very good night. But then there are nights where he's all over the offensive glass, he's dunking on people, he's hitting threes. There were games literally that he won single-handedly almost for the Toronto Raptors. I called him Quebecois Kevin Durant when he was doing that kind of stuff because it was so strange looking seeing that trebuchet shot, those long arms chucking up threes. And let's be honest, the guy was a chucker. Whenever he got the ball beyond the 3-point arc and he was at least a little open, he was not swinging that ball. You could be wide open in the corner. You could be the best shooter on the team. He's letting it fly.
He's taking it. Especially during the Nick Nurse years, I think he had a relatively short leash, so he just wanted to try to get his buckets whenever he could, and that's when I didn't like him. It was so frustrating. You knew that it was second, it was touching his fingers, it was going up. He transformed that a little bit under Darko. He started to do a little more, okay, let's do a little dribble handoff, let's do a little whatever, and he got really good chemistry with Scotty Barnes. I think they're really good friends, so they trained together in the summer. I think he made a little progression. He became a little bit better of a player. And so near the end of his tenure, I liked him a lot more than I did during the Nick Nurse years.
Well, there was that one, if you recall, like a while ago, where his season kind of turned. I believe it was when he was playing against Cleveland. I think it was like 2 years ago. And he had the worst game, one of the worst games I have ever seen a Raptor play. Not just like the shots weren't going in, but it was more about the process. And I think a bunch of other players were injured that night. So it was like,
Yes.
he's like, it's go time. And
Yeah.
he was just a brick machine, just denting the rim, just hoisting up every type of shot that didn't matter whether it was good or bad.
We lost by like a lot.
Yeah.
It was a bad game, and I think I remember him talking about it, where
Yeah.
he basically had said that he was feeling some type of way before that game, looking at Pascal and looking at himself and saying, "Why does he get all this run? I'm just as good," kind of thing. And then he had that game where he had to be a number one option,
Yeah.
and it humbled him so much that after he was like, "Okay, hold on. I get it. I get why my role is this. I got to accept my role."
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that changed the way that his process and everything was when he had to accept, okay, I think I've got this ceiling, but it's probably better if I shift into a role because Pascal's job is actually really hard. They're really big shoes to fill, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I think that that's like a realization that a lot of people have to come to, especially when you're playing in a league as good as the NBA. People don't know how good these players are. Like, if you were a mediocre player in the NBA, you are like the best player anywhere else. So
Yeah.
obviously there's a transition, but
Yeah, I think Patrick Beverly averaged like 40 in high school. And he couldn't stick in the league. He couldn't stick on a team. He was just a defensive guy. Like
yeah.
these are the best of the best, right? So most people go from being the number one option to I have to accept it and now I'm a role player. And it's like, I think some players want to keep fighting it, but other players, the sooner you accept it, the better it'll be for your career.
Yeah, and let's quickly mention that he was kind of in Darko's doghouse, and I think that
Yeah,
unfairly too, because it was really like he was clearly good enough to play, especially the season 2 seasons ago,
yeah,
Darko's first year when it was literally scrubs like Jordan Nwora and a bunch of other players that have escaped my memory. I'm not good with names, even when it comes to good players. When it comes to scrubs, I'm just hopeless. But yeah, he should have gotten some.
Malik Williams was getting minutes over him.
Very good. I'm impressed. Yeah, so he was getting basically no run, and
Mhm.
this past season was similar too. It seemed like only when the Raptors were like desperate for a body, they would just, okay, get in there, Chris. And then he'd play really well. So I'll miss him, but I get it. I understand why they're not going back to him. There's another little tidbit that let me just find the tweet and then I'll bring it back up. But the most interesting aspect, there was a Michael Grange article that came out either today, I think it was yesterday, where Michael Grange basically said that there were Pascal Siakam, when he was with the Toronto Raptors, everybody at this point knows that he wanted to sign with the Raptors. He wanted to sign a maximum deal to remain with the Raptors and essentially just, continue his career along with the team, with the Toronto Raptors. Even after it was clear that they were kind of pivoting, going in a different direction, he kind of said basically that he was interested in staying with the Raptors and he was willing to sign. So the Michael Grange article that came out very recently, I think it was yesterday, was talking about how there were two voices in the front office, one belonging to Bobby Webster, one belonging to Masai Ujiri. And the very interesting part, I'll just quickly go to this article. Michael Grange, one of the best writers for the Toronto Raptors, he mentioned that the two people in the front office that were sort of at odds here were Bobby Webster, who wanted to sign Pascal Siakam. So let's take a look at this right here. An example of how Ujiri and Webster differed. It was Ujiri who was resistant to signing Pascal Siakam to an extension in the season prior to him being traded to the Indiana Pacers in January of 2024. Ujiri didn't want the risk of a long-term deal on his books for a player who he was no longer sure fit. Jesus. Let me try that again. Ujiri didn't want the risk of a long-term deal on his books for a player who he was no longer sure was a fit with Scotty Barnes' timeline. An injury to Siakam after he signed, or even just a downturn in performance, would have left the Raptors in a difficult situation. Blah, blah, blah. Well, let's keep reading. But not signing him also meant that they had less control over where Siakam could be traded as he headed into the final year of his contract, likely less leveraging for extracting a top price. Webster was in favor of extending Siakam, which would have given the Raptors more control in the trade market if they wanted to go that route, as they would be trading a player under team control for multiple years. So I gotta say here, Steve, I was a proponent of signing Pascal Siakam to an extension, and those were the exact words and ideas that I used, which I said, like, sign Pascal now, see how it works. If it doesn't work, you have him under contract, you can get a better deal for him. And I guess Masai kind of was afraid that it would become an albatross contract.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
I'll just be quick and then you can go. But I'll say, yeah. I think that was a misread. And I said it at the time. I said, I think this guy is a really good player. I think giving him this contract would be a good idea. And it turns out that Bobby Webster was the guy who should have been calling the shots there. I think it would have been a great idea to sign him. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, it's funny. I know at the time that I was in the camp that Masai was in. I was looking at it and I was like, this guy wants $45 million contract. This is going to be a really hard contract to trade if their plan is to trade it. Because if you look at the guys that are around that realm, it's like now you end up looking at guys like Zach LaVine who couldn't get traded easily. Like, there are guys who are good, but their contract being big all of a sudden makes everybody think they're not nearly as good as they should be, and it lowers their value in general. So I was afraid of that. So I get kind of where Masai's perspective was, but I think it's interesting because I would have thought he'd be much higher on Pascal than I was, or even Bobby was. I thought he's the guy who's always trying to tell everybody, look how good Pascal is. So I was pretty surprised to hear that he was the one that was hesitant to it. And I guess, like, obviously in retrospect, it's pretty obvious that Pascal would just continue to be a good player and his value would probably still be high, because the main reason that he had low value was because he was expiring. It had nothing to do with his ability. Yeah. It had to do with the fact that he was just an expiring contract, and his market was limited because only a couple teams he would give that guarantee to. Like, I think people were, he won't go to the Kings because he won't agree to re-sign there. I mean, who would? Mm-hmm. Who would agree to re-sign with the Kings? And the Kings package, in my opinion, sucked. They weren't offering anything premier. They weren't offering good draft picks. So he helped almost dodge a bullet with that.
Same with the Hawks.
Yeah, exactly.
Hawks package. If you look back at what they were offering, Kobe Buffkin and what else was his name? I think we mentioned this the other time, but
AJ Griffin,
who no longer
retired at 21. Yeah. And DeAndre Hunter, who had a really good season last year before getting traded to the Cavs.
His standards.
20 point per game is pretty crazy. Yeah. Not quite the 3-and-D player that he's supposed to be marketed as, whatever, but that was the package we're looking at. We're like, okay, I think at the time he was averaging 15 point per game for several years. It wasn't an impressive package, but he wouldn't agree to go anywhere except he agreed for Indiana. And I think the package that they did squeeze out of him being a expiring player was a fine package, but I do agree that him having more years on his contract probably would have netted a bigger return. How much bigger? I'm not sure at this point. If we would have had to wait an extra year, I think the love that he's getting right now, he wouldn't have had, because he wouldn't necessarily have made a playoff run. Right. He wouldn't necessarily
He's not in the spotlight.
Exactly, right? And I think him getting to the right situation allowed him to be in the spotlight and allowed him to shine. And I think there's some Raptors fans who are upset, like, oh, we traded a Eastern Conference MVP for nothing. It's like, well, he wouldn't have been that if he was stuck with us when
Hey,
they're still tanking. Well, I mean, if the direction
hold
of the
on.
team
Whose
was
team are
still
you on
tanking,
here?
I'm just being realistic.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. That's bang on. And there's another thing is that I don't want to say that Michael Grange would, be selling lies or peddling anything other than the absolute unvarnished truth, if you're watching. uh, but let's just put it this way. Bobby Webster is the guy here now, okay? This is the guy that they want to make look good, okay? He is the person who has the position, and Masai is the guy who's left. So, let's not just assume the best in everybody. This could just be, maybe they didn't agree completely, but it's pretty cut and dry the way that they put it in this article. And the Masai, with the benefit of retrospect, was dead wrong, right? So, and Bobby looks like, an angel here. Oh, he was trying to hold on to Pascal.
Yeah,
He just wasn't able to convince Masai. Well, I don't know.
exactly.
Maybe, or maybe not. But, it's
Every
a good...
place, every place I've worked, when somebody leaves, every mistake that happens from there on out was probably that person's fault for the next couple of months.
It's
like,
Biden's
oh,
fault. It's
it,
Biden's fault.
it's the easiest way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that is the kind of low key angle that's happening with something like this. But if you look at how they've treated the Jakob Poeltl situation now, they've signed him for X amount of years. This could be a similar deal, and this could be, I mean, maybe it's proof that Bobby was the guy to want to re-sign, to increase value, or at least to hold value for a longer period. And I think by having him stay at that same number for a couple of years, you do maybe kind of get the best of both worlds, where you haven't created such an albatross contract that you're worried about, and you also still have him being able to be movable, while also like not having to then try to move off of a guy who only has 1 year left in his contract, because I mean, Bobby's aware at how hard it is to move certain players.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a couple of contracts like that in the past. I kind of want to move things along. I don't want to stay on this topic for too long. I thought it was kind of interesting. And I think that for the future of the franchise, I do like the deals that they've made, and you can't just keep looking at the past. I mean, the past is the past. Pascal Siakam is an Indiana Pacer now, and he'll always have a place in my heart because he was a part of that championship team, and I had to go through the trenches fighting people on Twitter. That will harden you and make you feel like you need to support somebody. Is talking smack on Twitter with people who say that a player sucks. And if you have defended them for so long, you're kind of cheering for them when they actually do manage to, make a difference on the big stage. So congrats to Pascal and happy trails. We won't bring him up all the time. I just wanted to mention that because that was an interesting little tidbit. Now I think we should probably talk about some of the other moves that happened in free agency as maybe the last section in this video, when we can talk about some of the winners, some of the losers in free agency. Why don't we start with like the biggest winner, in my opinion? I would say the Denver Nuggets. I think that they have completely 180'd their franchise, which looked like it was heading into the toilet under their previous GM, who was just fired, Booth. What's his first name? Sorry, again.
Calvin Booth?
Calvin Booth. Horrible with names. That's me. But God, they were just looking dreadful. And then they made a couple of moves this offseason, and they're back, baby.
Yeah.
They have made some really nice moves. What did you think of their offseason so far?
I mean, yeah, I would agree that they're probably one of the biggest winners of this right away. I think, what did they move? They moved Michael Porter Jr., who they've been trying to get off that big contract for a while, even though he was like a decent contributor. But last playoffs, he had a pretty rough playoffs, although he was playing injured. But they moved off of him in a pretty nice deal to get Cam Johnson. And I think they only had to give up a 2032 unprotected first. So a player that they you would have think they would have to attach a pick to anyway to move.
Yeah.
And they get the value back of Cam Johnson, who is on a great contract, great shooter, pretty good defender, fits right in, and I think he's going to have a career
Smart.
year. Yeah, exactly. Very smart. You've seen him talk about the game and stuff. I think it was on JJ Redick's podcast or
Mm-hmm.
something. Um, and I think he's going to have a career year with Jokic, as a lot of people do. He's Jokic raises a lot of players' level, and I think he's going to do that for Cam Johnson too.
If you can get open, he's going
Exactly.
to find you. And that's
Exactly.
one of the things that he does really well. I mean, that was kind of Michael Porter Jr.'s game as well, is kind of roam around on the perimeter and shoot shots. He never lived up to his promise. He made a lot of, like, he wasn't terrible defensively. I think that
Yeah.
that's a lot of people, especially in the later seasons when he was healthy.
Hmm.
He was pretty athletic. He could move his feet. He could stay on the perimeter. He could help out inside. But he was just never healthy. He never was a dynamic offensive player. It was either just him getting hot from three and making them. I think Cam Johnson can just do so much more.
Yeah.
He's a more dynamic player. He is a better off-ball mover, better cutter. He can read the game a lot better, and that is going to be huge next to Jokic. So that's already a big win. They've done
Yeah.
some other stuff as well. They traded just recently. They traded for Jonas Valanciunas. They got rid of the corpse of Dario Saric.
Dario Saric, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, who's
I
not contributing anything yet.
Dario Saric had perhaps one of the most disappointing seasons because he played for Golden State and he kind of
Yeah.
contributed there too. He could pick and pop and do that. He went to the Nuggets and was just absolutely dreadful. So they get off of that deal and they get Jonas Valanciunas, who isn't, he's kind of semi-washed, but not as washed. And they just need a guy who can come in. They were doing DeAndre Jordan last season.
Yeah,
So
which
I
is
think it's an
crazy.
improvement.
Yeah, have a minutes eater, somebody who can, take some physicality so Jokic isn't just alone getting banged up. So that's pretty great. They went and got Tim Hardaway Jr.,
Right.
Bruce Brown back as well, which is a good feel good for
Huge.
them. Yeah. On
These
a much affordable deal than what they would have had to do if they traded him while he was on that last contract.
Yeah, they have completely turned the franchise around, added depth, added high level talent, addressed positional concerns, and this is a good jumping off point, good segue here because the Denver Nuggets made the deals that they made with two of the losers in free agency in the offseason. So let's start with the first one, which is the most transparent, is that they traded not Juancho Hernangomez, Jesus, Dario Saric for Jonas Valanciunas to, guess who, drum roll, the Sacramento Kings. Easily, I would say, the worst run franchise in the NBA.
Yeah.
They have had a dreadful offseason. Their moves are completely perplexing. The contract they gave to Dennis Schroeder, $50 million a year for 3 years. Who are they
Yeah.
bidding against?
No, it's
Why do they
crazy.
want him?
And because they were like, oh, we need to get a point guard now. It was like you've had all-star point guards and superstar upside point guards, and now you have Dennis Schroeder for $45 million for 3 years. It's
He'll be
crazy.
32 next season. He's never. Here's the thing: is that I remember when I was looking at the advanced statistics for Dennis Schroeder when he joined the Toronto Raptors, I was like, he's not a
Yeah.
good pick and roll player.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things he's good at is like, if you get him the ball with an advantage in isolation, like he's got a bad defender on him, he can cook a little bit. If you play him off the ball, he can shoot decently when he's catch and shoot. He can do stuff where he's like your third guard, there's worse players. If you need him to continually run as your point guard over and over and over and over again, you're going to be a terrible team. And
Yeah.
the Warriors figured that out. He had that fluke little season in Brooklyn, and then he's just right back to being what he always was, which is like a high volume, low efficiency third guard. And they signed him to a $50 million contract. They also did that perplexing trade where they sent 2 seconds to get Jonas Valanciunas,
Yeah.
kept him for 2 months, and then traded him for the corpse of Dario Saric for no return. It's like,
Yeah.
what are they doing?
I have no idea.
The other
No,
person,
it's crazy. Go on.
the other team that that the Denver Nuggets did business with is the other loser in this offseason. And I'm going to extend it because it's not just free agency. They also screwed up the draft. So I'm talking, of course, about the Brooklyn Nets. Sean Marks went from like the GOAT. He got all these picks back. He was like the superstar, rebuilding them on the fly after all the disastrous things happened to them with the superstars, got all these picks. And then he went out and had like the worst draft I think I've ever seen, and then follows it up by trading for Michael Porter Jr.'s like garbage contract, trading a really productive, very enticing player that you would assume this is a guy who can shoot the three, play defense, has a plus skill set on both ends, really good role player / quasi star. Like he scored quite a few points.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say a star, like really solid starter, very good starter for peanuts, for a bad contract and a late first. What the hell was that?
When you've got teams around, like you've got murmurs that the Warriors are trying to look for a sign-in trade to get Kuminga out of town. Did you call them? Did you I'm not the highest guy on Kuminga.
No.
But if you put Kuminga on the Nets and give him a chance, that makes a lot more sense to me than getting Michael Porter Jr. I don't know why you have that guy who is just maybe slightly a bit of a floor raiser versus, and yeah, as you said about the draft, they've got questionable draft picks, drafting all sorts of guards, just trying to, you're just as many shots from the cannon as you can.
Yeah, the draft was kind of ridiculous. They took a reach, Agor Demin. I liked him in a trade back scenario if the Raptors did that, but taking him, what were they, 7th or 8th or
eighth, yeah.
Taking him 8th is just like perplexing.
Yeah, they didn't need to
and then a bunch of guys in the late round. Not a fan of their draft, but in any case, they were not. Their future is questionable now, and I think you're absolutely right. But there is a chance that MPJ goes there. They let him cook. He's able to recoup his value. The only problem with that, there's twofold things. So it's not like you're taking a roll of the dice on some, minimum contract guy and giving him the rope, seeing what he's got, and it's not a big deal if he doesn't play very well. There's a guy on a max-ish contract. I don't think it's quite a max, but a huge contract, and he's always injured.
Yeah.
He was just injured. The reason he played like ass in the playoffs is because, as you said, the guy is not healthy.
Yeah.
And add to that the, crime against humanity podcast that he makes, where he is just asking the funniest questions.
And he just has like OnlyFans models on. And he just that whole family. Like I've got some friends who are Nugget fans, and they were like, "Oh, would you take MPJ for RJ Barrett?" And I'm like, "No, you keep the Porter family away from our franchise. Jonte did enough damage. Okay, we're not taking another one."
I just broke the frame. Yeah, I was throwing up the cross symbol because I think they are actually pretty religious. I think that's why they were homeschooled. But they are, very interesting family. Let's just
there's
put
like
it that
nine.
way.
There's like 9 of them. Some of them, multiple of them, are in jail. I think at this point, it's pretty crazy.
That is crazy. In any case, those are two of the kind of the bigger losers. Do you have anybody else on the winners or losers? Like, who else would you say kind of made a splash?
I would say the Rockets for winner. They came out right out of the gate and got Dorian Finney-Smith for a decent contract, which they needed to fill kind of Dylan Brooks's role. They wanted another 3-and-D guy. They were able to bring back Fred for $25 million a year, which is kind of the end game of their initial contract that they had with him, that 2+1 deal where they're going to pay him a ton of money up front to get him in the door, and then kind of probably a handshake deal that he would be taking less. And the way the Rockets kind of worked is, although Fred wasn't a perfect player for them, he was kind of at many times the straw that stirred the drink. So losing him would have been pretty bad for them. They brought back all their old guys like Jeff Green, Aaron Holiday. I mean, Jason Tate is not old, but he's older than you would expect.
Okay.
But the one thing it's hard to call them a full winner because I don't get the Clint Capella move.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
Clint Capella is like fully washed. I don't know
Yeah,
if you've watched the Hawks this past season. First of all, he's injured a lot. Second of all, he's just lost a step. He
yeah,
is kind of plodding around. The big thing about Clint Capella was the fact that he's like a lob threat, and he's like really, really active, and he
yeah.
could catch anywhere, and he could finish, he could out rebound. Used his body really well, and it just seems like he's just not doing that anymore. He's just not that type of player anymore. So yeah, I'm not sure what they were doing there, but obviously the Kevin Durant deal, I think you sort of buried the lead there. Maybe you mentioned it, but
No,
that,
I didn't. I didn't even mention that. I was just going off of
yeah,
their signings. But yeah, I mean, the Kevin Durant deal, they didn't give up much, and they got in a lead initiator, which they was kind of the biggest reason why they flopped out of the playoffs because they didn't have their go-to guy. And I mean, Durant at 37, Durant at 38 years old, he's still a bucket. He's still a 26 point per game player. He can still be your go-to guy. I know his last season with the Suns was a bit weird. At times they had him playing center. He An interesting stat I found is that he had one less block than Giannis, but he played like 10 less games. So
wow.
I don't know what they were doing with KD in
Yeah,
Phoenix that he was doing that kind of role. So now he gets to kind of the amazing defense of Houston. He gets kind of just to settle into his like, okay, I'm the lead scorer. Okay.
yeah. I mean, the Suns, what was happening there, they were so hard pressed for anybody in the front court to do anything that they basically a lot of the time had to go small, play him at center, and I mean, you can tell he doesn't want to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
he's old. He's like the Chet in the post. I mean,
Yeah.
he's obviously way more skilled than Chet and more of a perimeter player, but like he's the same measurements. He's like 7
Yeah.
foot something with a huge wingspan. So technically he can guard the basket, but like, what are you doing? It's like, using a Lamborghini to like tow something on the highway. Like
Yeah.
that's not what his role should be. It should
Hmm.
be going out there and getting buckets. And the Rockets, I think another big win for them was, listen, I really just am not a Jalen Green fan. I think that is pretty much the consensus at this point. But even I, you know, why am I saying even I've never really been on Jalen Green Island, and I've been following him for a while because obviously he's part of Scotty Barnes' draft class. He was drafted before Scotty Barnes,
Yeah.
and so there's that rivalry there. But unlike a lot of people in that draft class, it just seems like he kind of like started off rocky and just stayed there. Like he never seemed to make the leap that a lot of people were hoping for. And I think a lot of it is just his process is not good. His
Yeah.
process is just a guy who wants to chuck
Yeah.
and doesn't have a spot on the floor where he's just like really, really good.
Yeah. He has elite marches and Aprils. So
Mickey
he
Mouse marches.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he does that. And I was arguing with people on Twitter where it's like they're like he's making the superstar leap. And I'm like, no, he does this every March. Like
Yeah.
and
He has
then
a
it
stretch of
comes
games where he averages like 35 points or something
yeah.
like that.
Because I don't doubt that he can score. He's a scorer, great. It's interesting that Phoenix is going to keep him and run him in a backcourt with Devin Booker. We'll see how that goes. They'll probably have a lot of high-scoring games. I don't know. Devin Booker, I mean, the rumor is that I don't know if he's actually signed it yet, but he's about to sign that 2-year, $150 million contract. So as far as he goes, I don't think he really cares who's next to him. He's going to be making some of the most insane money that we've seen.
Yeah, that is quite the backcourt. Add in Bradley Beal there because there's absolutely no way they can trade that contract. Yeah, this has been an extremely okay. So first of all, let's zoom out a little bit. We'll talk about the free agency just as a whole. So the first day of free agency, like before it happened, Shams Charania was talking crazy. He's like, this is going to be the craziest offseason of all time. And it hasn't been. I mean, it's better. It's gotten better because there have been a couple of trades that have been pretty big and a couple of signings that have been pretty big, but it was just like an average, maybe even a below average offseason. A lot of players signing with their own teams, not a ton of movement. It just seems like it was like played as this major sort of inflection point where all these teams are going to just completely change their trajectories. And I only saw a couple of teams do that. And so,
Yeah, and probably the biggest change was not really a signing. It was the waiving of Damian Lillard. That
right, we
was
didn't even
not
mention that.
no, and that wasn't really like expected, I don't think, by Shams. And that was kind of a byproduct of their Miles Turner deal. And there's all the drama around it of, oh, did they tell him? And now he's coming out saying that he's actually happy because he didn't enjoy it there. And now he might come back post All-Star break and somebody might be able to sign him for cheap because the Bucks have waived and stretched him and he's going to make 25 mil a year for the next 5 years, no problem. So he might go end up on a minimum on Miami and they got their guy anyway. Completely out of left field. And I think it shocked a lot of people because I don't think anybody expected them to pull out of that experience so soon.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicting reports. Like there's obviously the Chris Hayes report that Giannis isn't happy and he wasn't consulted or something. I don't believe that. I think that he was in on it. I think that this is all smoke and mirrors. I also think like Sam Amick, who's obviously one of the lead guys at The Athletic, pretty reputable source. He was the guy who came out and said that, Damian Lillard was clicking his heels together on the way out of town. He's like, I'm so glad I'm getting out of here. My thoughts on that, first of all, I don't think it's very classy of Damian Lillard to be like this, how happy he is to be leaving, not Minnesota, Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That kind of sucks. But what I think it is like, he got waived, right? That can't be very good for your ego, that they're willing to basically eat your contract for the next 5 years. I think it's a really bad bit of business. We can get into that afterwards. But he's got to come out and say like, oh, like it's a mutual thing. They're not just happy to get rid of me. I'm happy to leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course he's going to say something like that. You can't get dumped and say like, oh, I'm heartbroken. How could they not want me? So I think he went out of his way to make sure that everyone knew that he didn't want to be there. And now he's going to go somewhere else. But let's talk about the waiving, the stretch and waive. I think this is underrated. One of the most disastrous moves that I've seen in the past decade. This is a very short-term thing. Of course, they were able to go out and get Miles Turner. I think that's, okay. I think they got him to a pretty good deal. And the idea behind it, the thinking is we got to keep Giannis.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea. Okay, Brook Lopez is signing elsewhere. He's kind of aged out a little bit, although he had an okay season last season, but they were looking at the writing on the wall. They're saying this guy can't be a high-level starter for much longer. We need to find a replacement. We need to go get his replacement. Miles Turner makes a lot of sense. He's a kind of 3-and-D center, and that's kind of what you want around Giannis. So they said, okay, how are we going to make this happen? We don't have any cap space. We got to do something. What do? Oh, they went out. They stretched and waived Damian Lillard. So this is what I would say kind of throwing good money after bad. I think Giannis is going to get out of there soon, or if he doesn't, he's going to be stuck on these horrible teams. Really, just if you've looked at the Miles Turner's fine, he's a good starter. Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of the best players in the league, and then the other guys are not. Kuzma's not a rotation caliber player.
Kevin Porter Jr.
Kevin
as
Porter
a
Jr.
starter.
Issues aside, I don't think he's a very good player.
No.
Gary Trent Jr. is a backup quality in my opinion. I have love for Gary Trent Jr. I think he was okay as a Raptor. I don't hate him or anything. He's not a starter. Yep. I just don't think he's a starter. And they got him, and he's probably the best of those three.
And then
It's
they moved Connaughton for nothing as well. I forgot they did that. They
yeah, but
shipped Connaughton out like with second round picks or something attached to
Connaughton
him.
is fully washed at this
Oh
point. I
yeah.
was I was looking at him because I'm like, maybe he could be on the Raptors now. Just completely washed. But like they completely aged out. Your point is correct though. They didn't get anything back for him. He
They're moving out
was
salary and not getting anything back.
right.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And what happened is that, as I said, throwing good money after bad, they have ruined their books.
Yeah.
They have $23 million, just a big brick of $23 million just sitting on their cap sheet for the next 5 years, stopping them from doing anything. Even after Giannis leaves and his huge contract, that's going to be sitting there, hamstringing them. They can't trade it. They can't get rid of it. It's there. I think that that is so short-sighted and damaging. What they should do, and I know that this is like he might get fired as a result, the general manager, but if he had a lifetime contract and he was looking into the future and didn't have to worry about his job, I think John Horst would have traded Giannis.
Yeah.
It's the end of an era. All of the players that you were relying on to back him up have aged out. It's time to sell and rebuild. And he was just like, I got to save my job. What can I do? Here's what I can do. And it has just been, that is just horrible business. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox here, but just wanted to mention that. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, and I think with the Giannis business, they've slowly lost suitors as people move on. When somebody gets slightly dangled, teams only wait for so long until they go, okay, I gotta find somebody else. So when you're like, maybe you could have pried certain players away from Houston, maybe you could have dragged a Şengün, and then you have to eat that Jalen Green contract and stuff like that as well. But now you can't because they moved out that half. They moved on to Durant, and they're moving forward with the team that they have.
right.
Like there will obviously always be a market for Giannis, but I do think that in a year or two, if that's how long it is, he's gonna go for less than they would expect.
He's going
I
to ask
think,
out.
yeah, and exactly. I think that when you right now you're thinking, okay, we're gonna get 6 first round picks, we're gonna get everybody. It's like maybe you'd get that now, but they're gonna wait and they're gonna try to put this clunky roster forward. And I don't know how much longer they're gonna test Giannis's loyalty with this.
Yeah, this is, I thought that they would just completely blow up last season. I think I
Yeah.
was a season too early because they did have that kind of miracle run after they started so poorly and, kind of put it together until the Damian Lillard injury. Man, that is tough for Bucks fans.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I'm trying to think if there's any other like major news, either Raptors or in the NBA. There were a lot of signings. A lot of them sort of don't rise to the level of like super newsworthy. I don't think that there were a ton of moves, like earth-shattering moves that have happened in the offseason like we were promised. Like, damn it, Shams. Why did you have to get
No,
me hyped
exactly.
up? I think that most teams are just going to carry on and see what they've got going into next season. I'm sure there will be a couple more signings. I mean, there's a lot of people still left on the free agency board. A lot of older players that are probably going to have to accept being backups somewhere. But yeah, not a ton of business left to do. There is one more thing I want to talk about. RJ Barrett, do you see him getting traded at this point or not?
I think the Yak extension and I think kind of how they've been moving. Yeah, I think that is the ultimate thing that's going to happen with RJ this year. Obviously, they want to duck the luxury tax. I don't think they have to do too much to do it. They could get by probably with Ochai's deal, but I do think that they've constantly signaled that. Now, we do have to see how the new direction of the office feels about it because maybe the person shopping RJ all this time was just Masai. We don't really know, but
Yep.
I feel like the organization themselves hasn't really promoted him that much. I still think that the move is that he's going to get moved, but the suitors for him, it's tough. I don't look at so many teams and I go, they need an RJ Barrett.
Yeah.
Might
He's got
have
a.
to.
Sorry, go
Go,
ahead.
no, just yeah, you might have to look at the teams that have a bit of ugly contracts on their books to move off of that.
Right. I also think that the fact that they were able to keep Yak at his current contract on the extension, I think it gives him a bit more wiggle room
Yeah.
with RJ's contract because Scotty's contract kicks in next season, and that'll put them pretty close to the second apron. I think the Mamu deal just like keeps them shy of that. So, but maybe the fact that they were able to get Yak on that extra season at the amount that he is currently on, the 19 million, that might make it so that they could keep RJ around a little bit longer. So maybe the pressure is off and they don't have to think about dealing him. With that said, I think that they're going to have to figure out what his role is on the team coming up, if he is going to remain on the team. Because with Emmanuel Quickly healthy and Brandon Ingram on the team as well, it's looking more and more, I think, just if I were a betting man, I would say that maybe he would start off of the bench. Maybe not first game. Maybe they would try him in the starting lineup in the first game, just to run with all the good players or the big name players in the starting lineup. But I think by game 40, he will be playing off of the bench. But that's just me.
I would agree because I think you lose too much with his defense. And when you have guys like say they kept Ochai or even Jacoby, you're getting a lot more defensively out of both of them and kind of accomplishing the same thing of being able to shoot.
Right.
Right now, I mean, like Jacoby's young, but he shot around the same what RJ did, but in kind of much better process. And Ochai just was maybe the second best shooter on the team behind Battle. I think you win a lot more minutes having somebody like Ochai start. But yeah, that'll be a tough conversation. RJ's never come off the bench, really, I don't think. I think even I wasn't really paying attention to the Knicks as he was a rookie, but I don't think he's really ever come off the bench in his career, and I don't know what that would be like for accepting that. But if that's his, if that's his role, he's getting told what that role is. And if he wants to, I don't see him as a guy who's going to pout. He is a mature guy. He is a guy for the team. So I think if he does get moved to the bench, then it's just, his role is, okay, you go out there, you get your touches, you keep driving to the basket, and you just go out there and cook. He's insulated by defensive players like Shed and like Jacoby and CMB coming off the bench with him. I think there's the realm where that could work.
Another thing to note is that if the team is winning, I think it'll be an easier buy-in from him because it's like, okay, you're going to get a lot of shots. You're going to come off the bench. We're going to be winning. You'll get buzz as, a sixth man candidate, all that kind of stuff. You could probably sell it to him. The team sucks. The guy is going to be thinking about where he's going next.
Yeah.
He's not going to want to come off the bench because that's going to cost him big for his next contract. So that's something to think about. In terms of fit, there's somebody in the comment, Johnny, says, I'd rather keep RJ over Quickly. So I know that earlier in the season, I was like, wow, okay, RJ, he seems like he can be a lead ball handler, lead guard. I think as soon as they made the trade for Brandon Ingram, you really just kind of like, you need shooting. Yep. That is the biggest thing. You have to have guys who can play around Scotty Barnes and Jakob Poeltl. Let's put him in there because he doesn't shoot. Brandon Ingram. You got to have guys around them who are willing and able to put up and make a lot of threes in the game. And that sounds more like Emmanuel Quickly to me. So I would say that just in terms of the trajectory, and also if you look at the advanced statistics, Emmanuel Quickly is better than RJ. I know that it's hard to quantify goodness, and especially using just one statistic like an advanced stat. With that said, I think it's kind of my eye test as well. It's just the things that you need to be good at as a guard are things that Emmanuel Quickly is good at. So screen navigation, that's a very big one. If you're at the point of attack, you've got to be able to follow your man all over the court, and Quickly does that. He's not disruptive. He doesn't get his hand on a lot of loose balls. He doesn't turn people over very much, but he does stay attached to his man around screens, and that's important. RJ has problems with that, and if he's being asked to play off of the ball, he can fall asleep and stuff like that too. But the big thing is just the shooting. You just have to have a guy who is not only a standstill catch and shoot shooter like RJ, and who is okay when he's doing that. You got to have a guy who's a dynamic shooter, and Emmanuel Quickly certainly is that. He can catch and shoot. He can shoot off of the dribble. You can run him off of screens, use Jakob Poeltl as a way to get him free for shots like that. So I think that just in terms of roster construction, and also think like from a talent standpoint, I think he's the better player. And if I were a betting man, I'd say that he is on the team rather than RJ, even though I have heard that they are both being shopped. But I don't know if I completely buy it with Quickley because they don't have many other options at point guard, at least starting caliber options.
Yeah, I think everybody knows that Quickly's contract is a little bit gross. It's a bit higher than you'd probably want to pay him. But if you're looking at moving off of Quickly, you don't have another option at point. You'd be having to attach picks too quickly. And I mean, maybe if you're like, okay, we attach 4 firsts to him, then maybe you can get Garland, but they're just doing it for the firsts at that point. But it, yeah, it's kind of a tough go with Quickly. That being said, if the season doesn't go as planned, I could, and they are losing, I could fully see after the deadline that now Quickly got moved out for maybe some expiring, maybe try to get a little bit of pick capital back, and you're all of a sudden running Jamal Shed as your starting point guard to finish the season. Because if it doesn't go so well, I could see them pulling the plug one last time and saying, okay, maybe we'll have better luck with this lottery. I think there's so much unknowns with the new leadership that's coming in. You got to see who they're going to decide that they like with this roster. How many guys were Masai guys that he was maybe protecting, or that he was saying, I believe in this guy, keep this guy. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they get shipped out. We'll see if they get shopped.
Yeah. I agree with that analysis. And I'll just throw one more thing in there. Regarding Quickly, he came off of a very uncharacteristically injured season. So if you go through his, and this was one of the points that I had to argue quite a bit this season, was that he is not an injury-prone player. So the past couple of, like, when you look at his, how many games he played per season, it's pretty consistently in the, like, 60s, 70s, like, pretty close to, like, full availability. This past season, he was out for large swaths of the season. And in my opinion, I think that those were fluke injuries. I don't think that those are things that are structural, that are going to remain in place where it's going to keep coming back up over and over again. I think that getting rid of him this offseason would be selling low. I think that he has the reputation of being a guy who, like, he has to be able to be put into a position where he can show that he's got something there so that his contract doesn't look onerous. Because I think if you were another general manager, you're looking at this guy and you're saying, okay, he's paid, he's probably overpaid. Even if he plays well, he's probably overpaid. But a lot of the time when you make a trade, trading for an overpaid player isn't necessarily the end of the world if you're getting what you want out of it.
Yeah.
So if he gets to a point where he is actually a contributor, he's driving wins, and I could certainly see that happening with the other players that are around him. I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities to get his game off. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for him to run off of screens and shoot the ball, which is what he's really good at. And I think that giving him just a season to see what you've got, I would rather do that than try and get pennies on the dollar for him. Because I was a fan of his in New York. I thought that I mentioned it before the trade. I was like, if you're going to trade OG to New York, try and get Quickly, because I like this kid. So yeah, I believe in him. I'm a Quickly believer, but that's just me. In any case, unless there's anything else you want to talk about, that's probably going to be the podcast. Hopefully the audio issues and all of the other things that plagued the other streams that we did aren't as much of an issue. One of the things, just some housekeeping to talk about what the future of the podcast is. We are setting up a Patreon. We are setting up, I'm going to be setting up a web page. I'm going to be setting up a whole bunch of things, maybe even a Discord. So stay tuned. I'll keep you guys appraised on both Twitter, and I'll be writing some stuff in the YouTube's comments. You know, you can make posts. You can sometimes see that on your YouTube feed, those weird posts that people make. I'm going to be making a couple of those to let you guys know what's going on with the podcast. Another thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be clipping these and just posting little snippets where we talk about stuff. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this format. Is there anything you want to pitch or talk about before we sign off, Steve?
No, mainly just thanks to the people that came and hung out, the 40 or so people in the chat. And it's nice seeing your chat messages. Sorry if we can't always talk about everything that you mentioned, but yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying it, and we're just going to keep trying to make it better as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, you're on the ground floor, okay? You're in the mailroom of something's about to take off. We're going to go to the moon. You guys are invited, okay? All right, so hope you enjoyed the podcast. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's right. That's the next thing. Raptors report cryptocurrency. You got to hold that stuff. Absolutely. Okay, guys, signing off.